Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Olawale. And Happy New Year to everybody. My guest today is Kyle Overmyer. He is someone I will call an overcomer. He's a personification of rehabilitation and redemption. He exemplifies courage in the face of shame. He was a former sheriff who was arrested for stealing drugs. He was convicted and sent to prison for 4 years. He'll be sharing his story with us today and his story of redemption and his story from being a sheriff to a convicted felon and to overcoming addiction. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I appreciate it, and it's an honor.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a bit more about Kyle Overmyer? Who is he?
Um, I guess I grew up in a um, unbroken home, great parents. I had a sister, small town up northwestern part of Ohio, and father was in law enforcement. My mother had a good job at working in an office at a construction company, and sent to a private school, got a great education, and played sports, and couldn't ask for a better life as a child.
Hmm. So, what sport did you play?
I played football, I wrestled, I boxed, and played a little baseball as well.
Yeah, you have a build of a bodybuilder. Did you ever dabble in bodybuilding?
I did. I competed actually first. Um, in the early 90s, I did powerlifting. I ended up winning the state championship down in Columbus, Ohio, the APF. And then I did ventured and changed it up a little bit and did the diet. And it's a very tough and disciplined thing to do, and did a couple bodybuilding shows. And uh, it was quite interesting. And now back at working out again.
And what made you decide to become a cop?
My father was in law enforcement for 38 years. I originally went to the University of Toledo for 2 years, and I majored in art. I like to paint and draw as well. I didn't see any future in that, so I dropped out. Didn't know what I was going to do. Worked in a couple different factories, and then decided to go to the police academy, and went through the police academy after that.
Hmm. Uh,
Uh,
what kind of work did you do in between trying to figure out what you wanted to do?
Anything from working in factories, construction work. I even worked in a gym for a while, helped them do the little personal training. And, I was kind of lost. I didn't know where I wanted to go. But then, being around my father all my life, and it was a respected profession to do, I figured follow my father's footsteps. And so that's what I did. I even went back. I did end up going back. I got my associate's degree in police science, and I ultimately went back. I got a bachelor's degree in business administration from Tiffin University as well.
Wow. What was police academy like for you?
It was fun. It was a lot of young men and women. They all wanted to achieve the same goals. You build a camaraderie, and um, it was kind of exciting. I was young, looking forward, and I had a lot of dreams and aspirations of what I wanted to do in law enforcement.
And then you decided to run for election to become the sheriff. What was that like? What was that journey like for you?
Well, prior to that, I worked my way up. I started in 1996. I went from corrections. I worked road patrol, and then I was promoted to detective sergeant, detective captain, and I worked a few years undercover with DEA, purchasing large quantities of cocaine. From that point, then the opportunity came when I was 34 years old. I was the youngest actually sheriff in the state of Ohio. Um, I was then elected back in 2008. Um, I was always one of these individuals that wanted to achieve more. And as the older I got, and I continue to get older, I get hungrier and thirstier for bigger things in life. And so I decided to go for it, and I got
Yeah, your name is Overmeyer, overachiever. That's a good thing. And what did it feel like to have such power at such young age?
I think at first it was like the rush. You get that rush of like being on stage and everybody, you were the one that they looked up to and looked for the answers. And at a young age, being married and two young children, um, it could become very overwhelming too. You're in charge of a whole county. I ran a jail, communication center. I had a detective bureau, road patrol. I was juggling a lot of things, and a family. And yeah, it got quite hectic. And but there was a lot of great times, and I met a lot of great people.
You had your hands full. And what would you say were the highlights of your job as a sheriff?
Um, I think one of my highlights, which is quite interesting, I always saw that people could change. So I started my own jail garden at the sheriff's office. Um, I kind of approached the idea with the community in Sandusky County, and I had a lot of individuals that ended up donating seeds and plants. And I had a 2-acre garden at the jail, and I had a group of the inmates actually work in the garden, and then they would harvest the food, and in turn we then utilized it in the jail to feed the inmates. And I saw it as not only as a money saver, but a form of rehabilitation as well.
Uh,
I went
that
from
was,
that point. The next year I ended up having them raise their own chickens as well. We had a mini farm. And it was interesting to speak with some of the inmates. I always went into the jail and talked to a lot of the inmates and find out what their thoughts and feelings were. A lot of them would say, I would start something in life, but I never finished it. It was nice to see a plant actually grow and what the outcome was, and they were proud of it.
yeah, that was very impressive.
So that
Then,
was one of my big highlights. And I was awarded and presented a lot of accolades for those kind of things. Actually, I was the first ever Taxpayer Hero Award, who was from the auditor, and that was our Attorney General, Dave Yost at the time. And I actually was got the first ever Taxpayer Hero Award from him for that reason.
wow. Then after Dave Yost came DeWine, which in 2016, his office indicted you on 38 felonies for stealing drugs and from drug boxes, and you were arrested, held in jail as a sitting sheriff at the time. How did you feel when you got the news of the indictment?
At that time, with my addiction, I was clean at the time, but I still never wanted anybody to know that I was an addict. So I continued to march on. My ego got the best of me, and I was actually running up for reelection at that time. And after I bonded out, I continued to run for reelection.
So when you got news of that indictment, so it had no impact on you?
It did.
Okay.
It did. But I never let anybody see it. Like they say, never let anyone see you sweat. And I acted, and I was a heck of an actor, like a lot of people that hide their addiction, you know, um, smile on the outside, but dying on the inside.
Did you imagine that it could end up sending you to prison
No,
at that time?
absolutely not. And you know, I really wanted to go. I still needed treatment. I definitely still needed treatment because I went cold turkey, Emmanuel, and I did it all on my own. I did it the hard way. And sometimes you can just quit a substance, but the true problem is what's going on inside. And you use the addiction piece, the drug piece, to heal the wound, but you're not. You're just putting a band-aid that keeps popping off. So I still needed that help and that treatment. And that's what I really wanted. And I thought maybe they would give me a little bit of leeway, but of course they didn't.
Yeah. Now, going through that, because you were a sitting sheriff, you still had your family, you still had your friends. What was it like for you having to deal with people from regular life who are looking at you like, wow, this guy has been indicted, and you are just moving on as if nothing is going on?
It was tough, especially with my wife at the time and children, who I we ended up getting a divorce. We get along great. She's a great mother. Actually, my wife today, and they get along great, which is nice. And it was tough for my kids. They eventually they revoked my bond at one point because I bought a crossbow for my son for his birthday, and I had to go for the hearing. I'll never forget it. It was a real turning point in my life. My son was 12 and his 13th birthday was coming up. I dropped him off at school. He's like, well, I see you today. And I was going to go for the hearing, and I thought I would breeze through the hearing. That was the last time I saw my son for 4 years.
Mm, wow. How was the reunion like after you got out, or the next time you saw him?
Pardon?
How was it the next time you saw your son after you got
Oh,
out of prison?
between him and my daughter, like being born again. I mean, an amazing feeling.
Mm. So it's like you have to get to know them all over again.
Yes. But while I was incarcerated, I talked to them every day on the phone. They never wanted to see me in that capacity. And I understand. Who wants to see their father wearing a jumpsuit and being locked up behind two fences? Nobody. Nobody wants to see their father that way. And I understood.
Especially if they've always seen their father as the top cop
Correct.
in in the community.
It was kind of like I had wore a cape and had an S on my chest, and yeah, whoever wants to see their father like that? Nobody.
So I don't want to rehash what has been in the news. I want you to be the one to tell the audience what happened, what led to that indictment, and what led to the conviction and everything surrounding your addiction.
What happened? How everything evolved, so to speak. Um, I was diagnosed with arthritis. Ultimately, I was given 105 Vicodin in a month. I broke my ankles when I was a kid playing different sports, and agonizing pain. So I went to a specialist, and they gave me opiates. From that point, things spun out of control. I think with a rocky marriage. And I had, at one time, I had a total of $62 million in lawsuits I was dealing with at the sheriff's office. One was involved with a fatal shooting with an individual that pointed a gun at us. Another one was one I inherited from the past sheriff, that inmate died in our facility. And I had to deal with those things. I went to a scene one day, we had 3 children drowned on us. So I think the totality of everything released the beast is what happened, Emmanuel. And from one point, it went from the 105 Vicodin were enough, and then they weren't anymore. So I had to get creative. I struggled, and I started doctor shopping and going between multiple doctors. And then when the take back box where they would throw out the old pills, it's like put my hand in the cookie jar, and I had to feed my addiction. And that was the only way. And there was no way I would go to the streets, because the dope boys, everybody knew me. And I was a narcotics guy before, and I was the one kicking in doors, getting everybody. And I was never going to go to the needle and use heroin. So I stuck solely to the pills, and it all caught up with me.
And did you, because the investigation had been on for about a year before they eventually indicted you, did
Correct.
you have any inkling that they were looking into you?
Yeah, a little bit. There was, some rumblings about it. I'd blow it off at one point. Then they stopped it. And then during the primary election, I ended up winning by 60 some percent. And my opponent was pretty upset about it. So the push really turned it up to really get me. And I don't blame anyone, Emmanuel. I don't blame the doctors. I blame myself. That was me, you know.
After the indictment, how did you hear of the indictment? Is this something you saw on the news like everyone else, or were you served?
Well, I knew that they were going to the grand jury on me that day. It was August 23rd, 2016. I was at the ribbon cutting for our county fair in uniform. And by 6:30, 7 o'clock that night, I was in a jumpsuit. I got a call. I had an attorney, and my attorney called me, said, let's go turn yourself in. They got you. And had to do what I had to do.
You turned yourself in. How did it feel okay, you said in the morning you were in your sheriff's uniform. By the evening of that day, you were wearing a jumpsuit. How did you feel with that quick transformation?
It almost seemed like a dream, but for some reason, because at that time, and we'll talk about it, I've changed as a human being. My ego was still big, and I thought, I got this. I'm going to beat this, Little did I know it was going to beat me.
You felt untouchable.
I did. And that's what addiction does. And it pumps your ego up sometimes too. It really does. And I was in denial. I still was in denial of ever having a problem. I didn't want no one to, think that I had a weakness but inside I was still feeling that shame. But I didn't want to ever reveal that, especially to my children.
Wow. Then you were eventually granted bond for $150,000. How long did you spend in jail before you were granted bond?
Only overnight. Only overnight, yes.
Then after you got out, you posted bond, you got out, you're still working, still running for re-election. What gave you that confidence that everything is going to blow away and just go away and you're just acting like everything is normal?
My ego, and I didn't want anybody to ever think that I was an addict, because that shame, that weakness, so to speak. But as time went on, I found out it wasn't a weakness. It was a disease. And I just kept going. And I didn't want to let anybody down, especially my family. And, well.
What was that conversation like with your wife at the time?
I guess, so to speak, I still lied to her. I was in denial. I didn't do any of this stuff. They're out to get me. Anything that I could come up with to kind of smooth everything over. But as they always say, where there's smoke, there's fire. And there was more fire than smoke.
And you were raised by wonderful parents who came from a great home. What was it like facing your parents? Were they still alive at the time?
It was tough. They didn't want to believe it as well. Addiction does run in my family. So my mother had an understanding of it. My dad did, being in law enforcement, but they still stood by my side. Especially my mom. As they say in prison, it's called ride or die. And she was ride or die. She stayed every day. I talked to her. And they never turned their back on me.
The mothers and fathers love. Yeah. And at some point, the prosecutor filed a motion to revoke your bond. Of the allegations were that you were still talking to witnesses, and things like that. Then the judge raised your bond to $250,000, and I guess you could impose the new bond.
No way out of that.
Yeah. What was that transformation like for you?
That's where I actually was sent to Marion County Jail, where they didn't think anybody would know me. And of course, people knew me there anyhow. And that's where I came to terms with, I started coming to terms with my addiction and talking a little bit about it with my mom a little bit. And I actually went to my first AA meeting there, to tell you the truth. And that's where the realization said, maybe they'll give me probation and treatment. I don't know. But I wrote letters. I needed help.
Who did you write to?
I wrote to the judge, um, a long letter telling him about my addiction and that. And, well, I,
Were you in jail during the re-election bid?
pardon?
Were you in jail during your re-election bid,
I
or were
was,
you
I
outside?
was. And,
Okay,
the results came out and I was beat, of course.
okay, okay. And I think after you lost the re-election, that's when you pled guilty.
I did.
Okay. What prompted you to change your plea from not guilty to guilty?
It was time to come with the terms. If not, I faced not only humiliation, but a lot more time. And I just needed to come to terms. And, you know, it took me time to just become honest, open, transparent, and responsible for what I did instead of blaming everybody else. And when you hear a lot of it, especially when you're on the inside, the blame game. I had to cut that out of my life, or I wouldn't be sitting here today, Emmanuel.
So it took a year for you sitting in jail, between the time you were arrested to the time you decided to plead guilty, and then you lost. Within that time too, you lost the re-election. So it took that time for you to accept reality.
Well, it wasn't a year. It was from November to November. They put me in November 3rd of 2016 for good in jail, and then I pled on December 13th, and then I
About
was shipped off.
about a month. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Then when you decided to come clean, how did you feel emotionally or mentally as a person?
Like the biggest weight was lifted off my mind, my heart, my soul. It's like when a guy's got chains, you break the chains. You're free.
Did losing the election made it real for you that this is it?
Um, I kind of felt like it was gonna go that way in a sense, but it all had to happen that way.
And then the judge sent you to prison for 4 years.
Correct.
Okay. What was did they maintain you at the same prison, or did they move you elsewhere?
I did my first about 30 days in solitary confinement. They sent me there, and I was in basically the hole, and in Grafton, and they did that for to end up placing me for protective custody. I was in then I they were did send me to protective custody for several months, but I didn't like it because there weren't as many. The movement was controlled, so I signed out and I went to general population.
Okay.
So I was with everybody, even people that I put in jail.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about solitary confinement first. Because I've read stories, I've heard people talk about it. What was it like for you?
It was at first dark, lonely, but the best part of my incarceration. I truly believe, Emmanuel, that isolation created elevation in my mind. I don't talk much about, my higher power, but I believe in God. That's where I got it. It changed me tremendously. I believe what we're doing today, I visualized it. I manifested it. So I could either go one side, which is the bad side, and continue down that path, or go the right side. And I decided to go the right side. And I'm very thankful.
So your isolation period was your own wilderness moment where you found yourself. Hmm.
The true Kyle.
Hmm. Wow. Then you were released into the general population and you had to deal with some of the people you've helped put in jail. What was that like?
They were very accepting of me. It was very interesting. I embraced prison fully, and I'll tell you a couple of things. My one roommate was He was a captain in the Aryan Brotherhood, tell you the truth. I had my workout partner was from the Blood Gang, and he was a Muslim. So I want to understand and respect his religion. So I read the Quran, and I did Ramadan, and I fasted from sun up to sundown as well. And anything that I could understand culture, I did. I'll tell you another story. I even they did Black History Month essay contest. I ultimately won it. They thought when they brought my prize to the cell that I was lying. They said, "You're not a black man." I said, "Well, why do I got to be a black man?" I said, I educate myself and I respect. And I got a lot of respect while I was incarcerated because of my open mind. And my mind kept getting more and more open. And I did a lot of observing on other individuals to understand people. And I got a passion for people now, I guess. And prison was quite interesting. Of course, I have a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories about that. But I got a taste of about every aspect of life in prison. And I don't regret it.
Did you ever get attacked by other inmates?
I did have an altercation with one, and of course, I did end up handling. It was another gang member, and that's where you really gain your respect. And later that night, him and his people brought me a bowl of food over and said, "We don't want no more trouble." And that's where you set the groundwork. You either got to fight, or they're gonna they're gonna extort you and take things. And I don't back down. I'm a really nice, laid back guy, but like I said, I boxed, I wrestled, I got some hands, and I'll go if I got to go.
Yeah. How did other the correction officers that work there, how did they treat you, knowing that you're a former cop and knowing that you used to work where they were working,
They were
used to
very
play their roles?
respectful to me. I had no problems with them. They great actually. Since because I had to serve 1 year of parole. I speak with the deputy warden quite often now. I even went back to the prison to visit him a couple months ago, and it was pretty nice to see everybody. And they were glad to see what I'm doing now.
And during that time, during the time you spent in prison, you were cut off from your family, your children, your wife, and from the way you describe your family, they seem to be your bedrock. How were you able to handle that?
Emmanuel, I look back now, I don't know how I did it. But I think the mind is a very powerful thing. And I have to say that during that time, I didn't find it to be punishment. I found peace in there. And while I was finding peace and finding Kyle, I don't know. I was able to maintain a strong mind, and I had that vision, and I knew there was going to be an end. For instance, I started to embrace different things, even with nature. I would work out, and then there out in the yard, there was a track, and there was a nearby woods there. So I just began to start to see the leaves change and notice, and I'm like, I never even paid attention to that stuff. I did, and that was also a turning point that one year was down. So I would use it as not only a clock, but a way to make changes in my life and respect nature and what God has given us. So I had a lot of those moments. I found gratitude. I never knew what the word gratitude was until, I was 40 some years old in prison. I mean, that's horrible. That's being selfish. And now all the simple things in life mean the most. For instance, I still wear my Timberland boots I got in prison. And I know it drives my wife crazy sometimes, but it reminds me where I was. Stay grounded and stay humble.
Awesome. Did you read some books in prison? If you
What was
did,
that?
did you read some books while you were incarcerated?
Um, I read, just I don't know, nothing real serious, or I never really got into books that much. I did a lot of writing and journaling is what I did. I see you wrote a book. That's something I'm working on right now, I want to share what I got out of incarceration in my life. But I think what really kept me grounded was journaling, and writing a gratitude list every morning, and from going to a cell to what I have now, I've hit the lottery.
Yeah. So, your transformation is so great and quick. So, my question is, who helped you along while in jail? Did you belong to a group, or was this something that you found for yourself?
Honestly, I think I pretty much found it for myself. I went to AA and NA meetings and when I was incarcerated. They had it was called an IOP program for addiction. I did that. Um, it was very short term, but for the most part, I kind of did it on my own. And talking to my mother and my kids on the outside, my father, that gave me my stability and my foundation that I knew I was going to get back to. I had other individuals that didn't jump off the ship that I was involved with on the outside that would write me. There was it's called JPay. You could email, and even for visitation, there was a couple guys that would come see me. And I thought, you know what? Good friends aren't in quantity. Well, they're in quantity, not in quantity. It's in quality. And I had that good core of people that still were there by my side and understanding and forgiving me.
Was there any point in time where you felt anger or think that, well, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me?
At the beginning, maybe a little bit because you're still in denial. But as time went on, it went easier and easier. And it just, honestly, you feel so much better because that weight is lifted off you.
Acceptance.
Yes, exactly. Acceptance is a huge thing when it comes to addiction and making the wrong choices in life.
Yeah. Correct me if I got your story wrong. I think you said you were clean by the time you got locked up.
I was. My clean date is actually February 3rd of 2015. What happened was a pharmacist stopped me. She stopped me and they red flagged me and took me aside. And that's when I got clean. Actually, I went back and visited the pharmacist. Her and I have reunited and we're very close now. She's kind of like my guardian angel.
Mm, okay. And then you were released from prison in October of 2020, which is like right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
It was tough. You know, I got a divorce while I was in prison. I stayed with another female and that didn't work out. I was on parole. So I knew it was going to get bad and I had to move out and I was homeless. So I went from, and I was frying chicken. I went back to my hometown to fry chicken. That was part of my plan. I wanted to face everybody because I didn't want to be a coward. I wanted to take responsibility, be honest, transparent about everything I've done. But yeah, I was homeless. So I called a woman that I knew that I used to work, be in conjunction with a community college, and she had a spare bedroom. So I flopped on her floor on a air mattress for a few months, and you know, it's better than nothing. And so that's what I did. And then eventually I got enough money together to get an apartment, and actually in a bad part of where I was from, and actually the same place I used to kick in doors and raid all the drug houses. Uh, and then from that point, I was at an AA meeting and got picked up to work midnight shift as a behavioral tech at a treatment center. So it was my first kind of role to get into, addiction, being an addiction advocate and helping others.
Thank you. Now let's talk about your divorce while in prison. Because when you got served and you knew your wife was going to divorce you, how did that make you feel? Did you feel like you were being abandoned?
No, no. And it was a lot of my fault. There was infidelities with me, and her and I spoke about it. She knew. And, of course, I apologize. I'm sorry for what I did. You don't step out on your wife and do those things, and that was a part of my journey is the wrongdoings I did, and I took responsibility, and that's probably why her and I get along so well today because I took responsibility, and so I understood her why she wanted to have a divorce, and in turn we weren't going to be compatible for each other, but we agreed we need to be parents. That's what we needed to be.
Yeah. And after you got released from prison, how were you able to mend your relationship with your children, not having seen them for over 4 years?
Little by little, it was tough. As time went on, I began to prove to them that I was a different Kyle and a different dad. I just didn't talk it, I walked it.
Yeah. What are those things you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are those things you did to regain their trust?
Well, when I told them that I'd be somewhere or do something, I did it. I was always early, or calling them every day, texting them, I think, every day with a positive affirmation. I changed totally. I still do that with my parents. I think my kids, being my daughter's 21 and my son's 18, they're like, Dad, you text me so much. They got other things going on, but it showed them that I love them and I care. And they saw that quick transformation, not only professionally, but as a human being, and the good things that I'm doing and the change that kept bringing them closer and closer and gravitating to me. And if you don't have family, you don't have anything, Emmanuel. And I know you're a good family man and you get that. And that's the only thing that bothered me about being incarcerated. My kids.
Yeah. And after you were released, you became an addiction counselor, helping other people to battle addiction. And that's what you do right now.
Yes. When I was incarcerated, I went back. I got my CDCA, chemical dependency counseling license. I went through that program, and I worked in behavioral tech. And now what I do is I get people in treatment. People reach out to me. I go work with businesses. Parents will reach out to me, and I'm like the guy that, basically the bridge that gaps between addiction to treatment. And I think it really helps me sharing my story and lets them understand if I can do it, then they can do it as well. And I think when I reveal my story, it's very shocking. They always think, how could the sheriff of all people get hooked on opiates? And I said, but guess what? No one's immune. It can happen to anyone. And I like to share that story, and I want to break the stigma as well, because there's a lot of people running and hiding that we probably know that are suffering inside, and I want to help. I don't want them to be what I was.
And after you got out of prison, you have to rebuild your life, from block to block, as if you're starting all over. How did you feel having to do that, knowing that you're a changed person?
Um, I think it's a breath of fresh air because I'm truly the real Kyle now. I think this Kyle was deep inside and this had to come out. And sometimes I tell people I think my addiction was a blessing because I'm able to touch more people now than I could when I wore a badge and a uniform. Way more people. And I can see the end result now. And I'm doing it for all the right reasons. And I think, you know what, we're too quick to throw people in jail in this day and age to punish. than help and rehabilitate. I feel that 80% of the people that I was incarcerated with struggled with addiction or mental health issues. And it's becoming a warehouse, Emmanuel. It's becoming a warehouse. And not only we could save taxpayer money, but we could help a lot of people, and our world would be a better place to be living in.
Mhm. So, in your own opinion, you don't think prison is the best place to rehabilitate some convict?
No, I found there's more drugs in prison than there is on the streets. From the day I got off the bus, Emmanuel, I was offered drugs to the day I left. I don't care what it is, you can find it.
How are you able to say no?
My kids.
So your kids were your anchor while in there. You just wanted to get out and
Yeah.
reunite with them.
Because I knew if I did one wrong move, it would stop what I'm supposed to be doing in life. And a lot of people knew what I stood for in there, and I wasn't afraid to speak about it.
Where did you get the courage to be like that in prison? And even after you got out, you are
As
just
I,
bold to talk about your story.
well, as they say, I want to be a lion, not a sheep. And I think if I don't share my story, I'm a coward, and it's a disservice to others. I have to say, this happened to me for a reason, or I wouldn't be sitting here with you, Emmanuel.
No, you wouldn't. Yeah. You owned your own story. To a lot of people, it's a story of shame and the stigma attached to falling from grace. But you owned it.
You
That
got to
is
own it.
impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I own everything I did, from my addiction to what I did to my family to, manipulating doctors, stealing pills. You own it. If you don't own it, you can never move forward.
Well, coming out, of prison and having to reestablish your life, did you lose friends from the past?
I did. And the ones that it's interesting, like I said, the good ones stayed around. But it's interesting because now that I'm doing so much better, so many are trying to come back. And you know what? You find out who your true friends are.
So there were a lot of broken relationships, all because of this situation.
Yes. Yes. But for the most part, I get a lot of respect because, like you said, I owned it.
And you recently celebrated 1 year anniversary with your wife,
I
Jennifer.
did.
Yes. What was that like?
Just another great moment in my redemption. It's part of the journey. I think everything happens for a reason. I always say your life's a puzzle, and it's thrown up in the air, and you got to put the pieces together. Whether you put them together or not, it's all up to you. And I think Jennifer was the last and final piece of my puzzle.
Yeah. How did you meet this woman who was able to give you a chance when everyone will be running away from
Um,
someone like you?
actually, it was through Facebook and mutual friends. It happened so quickly. November 22nd of 2020, we met. January 2nd of 2021, we got married. And it's been one of the easiest things I've ever done. We learn together, we heal together, we grow together, and we're a great team. And, you know, she never judges me when I don't judge her. And I don't know, we work well together. And I don't think there's a manual out there or a book that says how long you should date or how you should get married in life. Sometimes things happen because of love and emotions. And I'm an emotional guy. Before I went away. I was an emotional, and I'll talk about emotions all day long. Sometimes it drives Jennifer nuts, but that's who I am. I'm an open book.
Yeah, what would you say has been responsible for your transformation? Is it your belief in God? Is it a higher power? Or is it something that you attribute to yourself?
Like I said about the 30 days of being locked up in the hole, it did. It brought me to so many different things, and not only God, but who I was, what my purpose was. And like I said, when you isolate yourself, that elevation is created in your mind, and it expanded and took me to places that I've never even thought about. And it was like the bright light hit me, and it was time. It was really time. It might have been the darkest place, but truly the brightest place that I needed to be.
So you found yourself in isolation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what message would you have for someone who is battling addiction right now, or families of people going through addiction?
Don't be afraid to reach out. There's so many people out there struggling, and I always tell people they could either end up being incarcerated or they could be dead. There's, unfortunately, with everything out there, it's dangerous. So just don't be scared. And I was scared to talk about it before and reach out, and maybe this wouldn't happen, but I think this was part of my journey to do this. But I know it's hard. Shame and denial are two of the biggest hurdles to overcome an addiction. But once you make that first step, the rest get a lot easier and easier as the days go by.
I know a lot of people that will listen to the story or watch it and will want to reach out to you. How can they do that?
Well, they can always call me, and I answer my cell phone, text, everything. And they can call me 419-455-0793, or they can reach me on Kyle Overmyer on Facebook. And I get a lot of people reaching out on Messenger as well. And I don't turn anybody away. No one.
419-455,
0793.
and you'll be willing to talk to anybody.
Hey, everybody's worth it. And you know what? Everybody deserves a second chance.
Thank you. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're thinking of contacting Kyle, his phone number again is 419-455-0793. Thank you so much for coming on to Legal Angle. Your story is very inspiring, and the transformation is wow, wow, otherworldly. I'm very proud of the work you've done on yourself, and you are a true overcomer.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much,
coming on to
Emmanuel. I
Legal.
appreciate you having me. It's a pleasure again and an honor.
And for those of you watching the show or listening to the podcast, thank you again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe.